Hi guys, you're about to watch the free podcast of the Young Turks, fun for everybody. Now, you understand that there's only two of our segments. We do a live 2-hour show every day, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern.
And if you want to hear the entire show, all you have to do is become a member. Sign up by going to TYT-network.com.
You can go under member options to become a member, and when you do that, it's totally convenient. You can either stream or download the show, audio or video. Plus, you get more of our network shows. There's no ads whatsoever, and you help support the show. So, TYT-network.com. We'll see you there.
Welcome back to the Young Turks. Anna and John with you. Remember to use the hashtag TYTLive to send us some tweets. Do you have any that you want to read right now, or should we wait till the next break?
Sure. Actually, just about the execution one specifically, Travis Dodge said, "The people who say nothing was wrong are covering up that they enjoyed watching it."
That could
if
be
it lasts
true.
41 minutes, they get to enjoy it for even longer. And Nancy Frazier from TYT Detroit says, "If you're for torturing people to death, then you're no better than the murderer you're killing. We don't torture for our benefit."
I mean,
Yeah.
it's incredible because the majority of Americans are in favor of the death penalty, about 55%. So that's not the vast majority, but it's still a significant portion of the country, which means that there are definitely some Democrats that are in favor of it, and I'm sure they're the same Democrats that criticize the Bush administration for their use of enhanced interrogations, aka torture.
Yeah.
So
It's one of the most frustrating things as a lib and as someone who believes in like higher education and stuff like that. I mean, we both share that you would expect, okay, you can believe that capital punishment is totally fine so long as you believe that it's a deterrent and, no, we never make mistakes. Okay, but when you see those things repeatedly, those myths busted, like knocked down, to carry on with that belief, it is incredibly frustrating. And our job is to try to educate people, but it seems like there's a large chunk of the country and of the world, perhaps, that's just not interested in knowing the accurate facts.
And I didn't say this enough when we were covering the story, so I just want to have an opportunity to say it now. Just remember that there are many people that have been exonerated based on DNA evidence thanks to the Innocence Project. People that were going to face execution. They were convicted felons, but they were wrongfully convicted. Yeah. So just that alone, knowing that an innocent person could possibly die because of our very, very flawed justice system should be enough reason for you to really rethink the death penalty.
Yeah, imagine being in jail for 30 years and then being executed the entire time knowing that you're innocent. That's perhaps the most horrific thing you can imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we have some bad news today involving two different flights, one that went missing and one that unfortunately crashed. The first flight was an Air Algeria flight that went missing in Mali, and apparently they lost radar about 50 minutes after the flight took off. To give you some more information on this, reports indicate that the plane sent its last message around 9:30 p.m. EDT, asking Niger Air Control to change its route because of heavy rains in the area. Now that is specifically, yes, so that happened over Mali, and so they are not able to find the wreckage at this moment. Of course, there are search efforts to find wreckage, but they haven't found anything yet. They might have new information on this tomorrow, but any type of suspected terrorist attack has kind of been shot down, especially by authorities in France, because they feel that separatists in that area don't have the capabilities to shoot that plane down. Yeah. At this point, they're saying that the plane probably crashed. However, they don't know where it crashed and they don't know how it crashed.
Yeah. Whenever a plane goes down, especially over areas that we associate with some form of terrorism, it's very easy to imagine it being shot down. People forget that these planes fly, above 30,000 feet, and even the sort of stereotypical, like the Afghani, shoulder-mounted rocket launchers, they can't necessarily shoot down planes at that height. And in this case, at least, they do have the help, both the political and the military help of France to track it down. It's not a small country, of course, but since it is presumably lost over land as opposed to in the Malaysian flight that was lost at sea, it's going to be a little bit easier to find.
Yes. Now, people are understandably worried about flying right now because there was a second incident that occurred today, and that was a Taiwan plane that crashed. It attempted to land 2 separate times, but due to heavy rains, it failed to do so, and then finally it did crash in a residential area. It destroyed 11 homes. Unfortunately, 48 individuals died, and 10 are injured. Now, that was Trans-Asia Airways flight GE 222. And in this case, of course, it's tragic. A number of people are dead. But at the same time, it's crazy to know that at this very moment, there are 2 different flights that have gone missing in the same year, and we don't know where the wreckage is, we don't know where the people are, and people are understandably upset and worried. And people are also worried about flying. So just to give you a quick rundown of what's gone on this year alone when it comes to flights, and then we'll give you more information about how flying is generally safer than driving. These are airline disasters in 2014. In March, of course, there was the Malaysia flight MH370 carrying 239 people, and it went missing. In July, there was the Malaysia flight MH17, and it got shot down by separatist rebels, killing 289 people. And then today, we have the Air Algeria flight, which goes missing with about 116 people on board. And then the Taiwan flight crashes, killing 48 and injuring 10.
Yeah, and so of course that's very scary. Now, we don't want you to think that we're fear-mongering by covering these. We cover these because they're tragedies. We don't cover these because we think that the past couple of months is necessarily representative of what your experience will be like if you get on an international flight. It's not the case. And understand that when there's any sort of, like for instance, the first plane, the Malaysian flight that went missing, the media is going to be more sensitive for months afterward for other sorts of air travel problems because they've seen how much people care about it, how much they want to see the coverage. And so while these flights would probably be covered in any circumstances, the media is especially sensitive right now. But that doesn't mean that because a couple of planes have gone down, while those are tragic, that you shouldn't fly over these areas of the world necessarily. So we have some stats on exactly how safe or unsafe it really is. Now, depending on how you log, if you're just talking about your chance of dying per flight or per mile, estimates range from 2 deaths per 100 million passengers on commercial flights over the past decade. And generally, they say that your chance of dying on a plane is about 1 in 11 million. Now, contrast that with your odds of dying in a car crash, 1 in 5,000. Far, far, far more likely. You're actually more than 3 times more likely to be killed in a shark attack than in a plane crash. And we all know how unlikely the shark attack is. This quote perfectly sums up how safe you are on a commercial flight. A traveler could on average fly once a day for 4 million years before succumbing to a fatal crash. Hopefully that should provide some solace for you. In addition, a National Transportation Safety Board study found in 2001 that nearly 96% of passengers involved in plane crashes ultimately survive.
That's amazing. I think that's probably the most amazing statistic.
Exactly. Yeah, the sorts that we're seeing this year are outliers. We're covering them. That doesn't mean that it's happening all the time. And in particular, since we're very conscious about planes being shot down by terrorists, by rebels and things like that, instances of airborne terrorism, though a major concern for travelers, remain a rare occurrence. Nate Silver back in 2009 found that there was 1 terrorist incident per every 16,553,385 flights over the last decade. There is almost nothing more unlikely than you going down in a plane, especially as a result of terrorist action. Yeah. So while this is a tragedy, and I literally cannot imagine what it would be like to lose someone in my close family in a crash like this, it is not likely to happen, and you should not in any way alter your travel plans.
Absolutely. And one thing that I do want to add is how crazy it is that that missing Malaysia flight went missing in March, and we still have absolutely no idea where it is. There has been no wreckage found from that plane. Yeah. I mean, I would be a mess if my family members were on that plane.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this seems crass, but one of the reasons that the show Leftovers sort of resonates with people is that there are tragedies all the time. I mean, there have been, like for instance, in the past 100 years, there have been diseases that have wiped out significant portions of the world population. But there's some consolation in knowing how someone died exactly. The fact that you don't have answers in the case of like the Malaysian plane and in some other flights that have gone completely missing and were never found over the past decade, that's hard for humans to deal with. We need to know what the threat was. We need an explanation.
Right.
But anyway, hopefully you don't think that we're fear-mongering. You're safe on a plane for the most part.
We're just giving you guys the news and the information and then the statistics that basically reflect the reality. It's not unsafe to fly. Yes, a number of unfortunate things have happened, but if you compare it to driving, I mean, there are way more factors involved in driving that could lead to you crashing.
Totally, yeah. I mean, they say that you're more likely to die in a car accident on your way to the flight. But humans are irrational beings. Like I just told you, your chance of dying in a shark attack is 1.3 million. I cannot get in the ocean without thinking about sharks. So that's me anyway. But let's talk a little bit more about planes. The FAA late last night lifted its ban on U.S. flights landing in the Tel Aviv airport, Ben Gurion International Airport. Now, this had only lasted for a few days. There were concerns that the conflict going on right now between Israel and Hamas militants in Gaza could have risked some sort of damage to a U.S. flight. There are reports that the rockets that Hamas has been firing at Israel could theoretically reach to Tel Aviv, so it's not impossible. It was just extremely unlikely. Now, while they've lifted it, the agency says that they will continue to closely monitor the very fluid situation around Ben Gurion Airport and will take additional actions as necessary. I can't imagine how the threat to Tel Aviv could grow stronger after this point. But if it was, I would not be against the FAA reinstating the ban, especially considering what just happened in Ukraine just a few weeks ago, or just less than a couple weeks ago. Now, some people are not happy about this. One of them is former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg. He got into a little tiff with Wolf Blitzer on CNN. Let's take a look at that.
You spent most of the day here in Israel.
Yes.
As you know, a couple of days ago, the State Department issued a travel advisory saying Americans shouldn't come for non-essential visits to Israel or the West Bank.
Couldn't disagree with them more. If you don't feel safe here, I don't know where you'd feel safe. And I think the State Department is just overreacting in typical bureaucratic fashion.
Political reasons for that?
Why would you think that?
Do you think it? I'm asking you.
That's ridiculous. Why would you think that? It's an outrage for you to accuse one of our agencies.
I'm just asking.
By asking the question, you're implying that our government does things for political reasons, and maybe every once in a while they do. But it's your job to prove it. Just the allegation against our government, I personally take as an offense.
No, I was just asking you if you thought that there was some political motive behind the travel advisory or the FAA
Number
decision.
one, I wouldn't know.
Because a lot of people in Israel do, you know.
I don't know. You don't know, and the other people don't know. But just the tone of the question of trying to create dissension, it's insulting to America.
Michael Bloomberg has identified the most offensive thing going on in Israel right now. That is Wolf Blitzer's tone. Nothing going on with Gaza there.
That was an incredible interview. First of all, there was absolutely nothing wrong with Wolf Blitzer's follow-up question. In fact, I think that was probably the best follow-up question he's ever asked in his entire career.
Yeah.
Okay?
And perhaps the first.
I'm surprised that there was a follow-up question with Wolf Blitzer, but whatever. I mean, I think that was a good one, especially when you consider politicians like Ted Cruz making the argument that the Obama administration and the FAA are purposely banning American flights to Tel Aviv because they want to cripple Israel's economy.
Yeah, that'll
the
take
country that we give $3 billion to every year, we want to cripple their economy. Yeah, there are people claiming that the FAA and the Obama administration is doing this for political reasons. That's why Wolf Blitzer asked the question. That's why Bloomberg should answer the question, but he refused to do so, and he got defensive for no reason. And also, really, you're going to say that it's the safest place to be right now? Considering the fact that Israel is making the argument that they are going after Palestinians because they're bombing them nonstop, and that the Iron Dome isn't good enough to intercept every single missile rocket. Yeah,
they're saying that they face some sort of existential threat throughout Israel. Well, then theoretically, Tel Aviv, which is a part of Israel, and the airport in there, there's no reason why we should increase the risk to U.S. citizens. I'm not entirely sure what Bloomberg was saying there. Like, he clearly wants the planes to come in. He says that it was ridiculous that they instituted the ban in the first place. Absolutely ridiculous. But when Wolf Blitzer says, do you think it's political, he was even more offended by that. So what, are you just saying that the FAA are cowards? It's not a political thing? They just don't have the cojones to fly to Tel Aviv? I don't really understand the position he has there.
This is a perfect example of how the government is in a lose-lose situation, right? So the FAA bans the American flights. And the reason why it does that is because they're worried about flights being shot down or being in the crossfire of a rocket, or who knows. But no, we do know it's not a safe area right now, especially considering that 600 Palestinians have died as a result of this ridiculous conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians, right? And of course, there were casualties on the Israeli side as well, not nearly as many. But they're taking safety precautions to ensure that people are safe. And it doesn't matter. Like, they're going to get criticized for it. Had they not done it and a plane was shot down, what do you think the news coverage would be?
I think the Republicans would have been very easy on Obama because he was showing strength there. I'm going to partly disagree with you. I think that right now, Ben Gurion International Airport in Tel Aviv is a perfectly safe place to be at. But that doesn't mean that the FAA is wrong in any way to institute the ban, or that unilaterally U.S. carriers instituting a ban just for their own planes are wrong in any way. I don't think that that's the case either. It's just, you want to do something about what's going on there. And so the question about if there's a political basis for the ban, I think is totally fair. I think that it's kind of ridiculous. I don't think that Obama is exercising that sort of control over what the FAA does. But it is sort of ridiculous. And I totally agree. If something did happen, it would be a huge issue. I would actually say if there's any sort of political bias going on, one potential political reason why you'd have the FAA shut it down is if you want to give across the idea internationally that Hamas is such a problem, they're not just targeting Israeli citizens, but any minute they might try to shoot down an international flight. An act of international terrorism of which Hamas has not been recently engaging in. I think that that's sort of overplaying the threat that Hamas is posing right now in that area. And one final point is sort of disconnected. It's possible that I am misreading this, and I naturally am suspicious of CNN, but could we briefly just put up a still shot of that video? Ben pointed this out to me earlier, Ben Makowitz, and you'll see when it goes up there that although I have heard reports that there are actually buildings that you can do these sorts of reports inside of in Israel, they're choosing to do almost all of their reporting outside. And I believe the reason is either they are hoping that an explosion will happen far off in the distance, or they're hoping that their audience will hope that there will be an explosion far off in the distance. What other possible reason could there be to do all of your reporting on a cliffside overlooking Gaza? Maybe that's just me being overly suspicious and conspiratorial when it comes to CNN, but I think that it's odd that they don't normally stand outside for no reason whatsoever. Yeah. Anyway, do you want to push on or do you want to take a break? I think we got time for another one.
All right, do it.
Okay. A humanitarian group in Israel right now was trying to get a radio advertisement on the air that would list the names of children killed in the conflict in Gaza right now. The humanitarian group is B'Tselem. They've been operating in that area for a little bit over 2 decades, trying to make clear the human cost of the ongoing conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. Their ad listing the names of those children will not be allowed. The IBA, the Israeli Broadcasting Authority, says it is too politically controversial. That's the problem. The actual attack in the occupation, the invasion of Gaza, not too politically controversial, but the advertisement is. Now, B'Tselem has responded by saying, is it controversial that the children aren't alive, that they're children, that those are their names? These are facts that we wish to bring to the public's knowledge. They go on to say, so far more than 600 people, now it's actually 700 people since they made that statement, have been killed in bombings in Gaza, more than 150 of them children, probably closer to 200 now. But apart from a brief report on the number of fatalities, the Israeli media refrains from covering them. So there is a human cost, and they're trying to make it clear. Unfortunately, you have some form of political advertisement censorship going on in Israel, and I think it's too bad because I think many Israelis probably are totally fine with the action going on. Some oppose it. I think more would oppose it if they understood the actual toll that was being paid right now by the Palestinians.
Yeah, I think that when you try to censor any type of political speech, that political speech is actually going to get more coverage, right? The censorship now becomes the story, and people are going to wonder what's the message that the government is trying to hide. Yeah. So they might actually be hurting themselves by trying to censor this message, but it also kind of shows you what the objectives are of the government there. Because if they genuinely wanted to inform their public and they wanted to seem as though they were making a logical decision or logical decisions based on this conflict, they would be okay with that information going out to the public. But they're obviously paranoid about it. There might be a little bit of shame regarding it. I mean, when you consider the number of children that died as a result of this conflict, I mean, who's going to be in favor of that? Yeah. Hiding information never works. Censorship never works. Hopefully, this is the type of news story that resonates with people, not only in Israel, but internationally, and they realize what the government of Israel is trying to do right now when it comes to censorship. Yeah. It's information. This is not something that's meant to be twisted or skewed. It's just simply the number of children that have died and their names. And if you're trying to censor that, you're trying to hide something, clearly.
Yeah, I mean, how many times did we have the names of those who died in 9/11 read as part of a memorial? They just want to memorialize those children. And I don't think that we're irrationally coming down on Israel here. All governments do this to some extent. Certainly the U.S. government has done it. Back in the Vietnam War, we would routinely count civilians as militant deaths because we wanted to show how many of those bastards we were killing. Tonkin Gulf, you know, when we shot down the Iranian plane. Like, we lie about those things as well, and look at the reaction to Edward Snowden's revelations of things like they had the footage of the helicopter and stuff like that. We do the same thing. And to be totally clear, B'Tselem, the human rights organization, that is manned by Israeli lawyers, academics, journalists, politicians, Israelis who are trying to do the right thing. We had another report, I think it might have been mentioned on the show last night, about 50 Israeli reservists who refused to go into combat, making a political statement there. So all of that is true. But what else? Another thing that's true is that unfortunately earlier today a UN school compound was struck by Israeli tank fire. 15 were killed, dozens were injured. Now, we don't know how many of those 15 were children right now. Some of them were likely to have been children, and that is the 4th UN facility that has been hit so far in the conflict, which is still in its infancy, perhaps. And so that list of children's names is going to be much longer before this conflict is over, and it's unfortunate that who they are, what happened to them is being silenced.
Yes, and the conflict will continue as long as there's censorship, as long as there's criticism of anyone who objectively looks at this situation and criticizes both sides. It's going to continue on. There is obviously no hope for a two-state solution when you have...
Not in the immediate future.
Not in the immediate future, absolutely. If we continue having a conflict that's covered the way that it's covered in the mainstream media.
Yeah. And so I thought I was being fair by listing those things. I also want to be fair in the other direction, in all directions. And just one more big stat. Katie Sebas is one of our interns. She did some research, and she found this. In terms of the deaths and how they're distributed between the two sides on this conflict right now, since January of 2005, the conflict has killed 4,006 people, of whom 168 have been Israeli and 3,838 Palestinian. Only 4% of those killed have been Israeli and 96% Palestinian. The conflict has thus killed 23 Palestinians for every 1 Israeli. Now understand, before 2005, the number was skewed a little bit more, it's awful, but I suppose equitably. And understand that on both sides, Palestinian and Israeli, the majority are civilians. You're disproportionately more likely to be killed as a civilian than as a militant or an Israeli soldier. It's awful on both sides, but it's hard not to think it's a little bit worse on the Palestinian side when you're being killed at a rate of 23 to 1 and you have absolutely nowhere to go because you're penned into a small area as densely populated as Philadelphia.
Yeah. That also has its economy crippled because of, you know, certain blockades and things like that. But, you know, another thing that we should take into consideration is they're not the same when it comes to military capabilities. Like, people understand that, right?
It's a little off.
It's a little off. That's why you're seeing a massive amount of casualties on the Palestinian side and, you know, less casualties, much less casualties on the Israeli side. Palestinians don't have the Iron Dome. They don't have the U.S. government giving them $3 billion a year in aid. So to argue that, hey, both sides are equal and both sides are wrong, no, there is a little bit of an imbalance there, and it's important to cover that fairly.
Yeah, and we've been trying to do that since, you know, the initial, the killing of the Israeli teens, the revenge killing of the Palestinian teen. Like, we've been trying to make that clear and understand that sort of clarity comes at a cost, because even acknowledging how unfair this conflict is and how awful it is to be a Palestinian civilian caught in the literal crossfire between Hamas and the Israeli military, like, you're painted as an anti-Semite. There are people frantically typing comments like that right now on this video, and that is it's a light cost in comparison to what's going on in Palestine, and we will continue to do that. But you have to understand that as awful as it is to live under the fear in some sense of a Hamas rocket like landing in Israel where you might live, that is a real fear. I would be scared of that as well. For the past 10 years, though, 23 to 1. You got to remember that number.
Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about a terrible new law in Tennessee and some of the victims of that law. And then finally, what I cannot wait to talk about, the terrorist watch list. It turns out that The Intercept has leaked some government data on who ends up on the government watch list or the terrorist watch list. We'll give you the details on that and more.
Yeah. And tweet us at #TYT-Live.
That was a segment from hour 1 of the show.
Now for the better hour, the second hour.
Drums. You can get the whole show on TYTnetwork.com.
Young Turk. Second hour, we have some lighter news stories for you guys. Just really quick, so I responded to that tweet, and people are saying you misunderstood what he had to say, and he's claiming I misunderstood what he had to say, but they're still not clarifying what he had to say. My argument was that when it comes to defense, when it comes to the Israeli side, they obviously have more power and more ability to defend themselves than the Palestinians, and I'm specifically referring to the Iron Dome, okay? That's where I say that there's an imbalance. If you disagree with me and you have evidence to prove that, please, I'm begging you, send me information. I'm open to it. I'm not criticizing you. I just want you to clarify what you're talking about. That's it.
It's totally possible he meant something entirely different than what we interpreted.
Maybe there's a little bit of miscommunication, which is totally fine, but I want to know what's going on.
On a lighter version of that is frequently people will like send me a tweet, and I'll know that they're joking, but like they're responding to a video I made like 4 weeks ago or a tweet I sent out 2 weeks ago. I have no idea what they're saying. I understand it's a joke, but I have no clue what they mean. And so the internet is just full of that. That's half of what the internet is miscommunications.
Yes, it is.
And by the way, so Flint's Doubting Tom said, are you guys union now with all the breaks or what? We are not union. But we haven't actually taken too many breaks. If we don't take 2 breaks in the first hour, that means that people refuse to stop talking. Get ready for that tomorrow on the panel show.
Yeah, and
and it means that I'm fuming like, we gotta get through the stories.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
So that happens.
Panel shows are fun. They're the best. I love them. Okay, anyway, let's move on. I love this. A researcher from Notre Dame wanted to look into why college-educated people support the Tea Party. Now, already the basis of the study is kind of funny. Like, why does he want to know that? It seems like he's a little surprised that college-educated people would be supportive of the Tea Party. But he realized that the bubble that you live in has a lot to do with it. Now, here's what he found through his study. College graduates are more likely to support the Tea Party ideas if they live in counties characterized by high levels of residential segregation based on education level. Now, before we go further, just think about what your education level, in most cases, determines. If you are highly educated, you're more likely to be in a better socioeconomic status. Now, of course, that's rapidly changing considering how many student loans people are taking out. So the dynamic will certainly change in the future. But for the time being, if you have higher education under your belt, you're more likely to be in a better socioeconomic status. The researchers found the correlation, remember correlation, not causation, but it's still a strong correlation between Tea Party support and educational segregation to be uniquely strong compared to factors like racial segregation and class segregation. So what the researchers found here is that if you are in your own little bubble and you identify as a Tea Party supporter, you're more likely to be in favor of things like less governmental programs for the poor, so less government spending. They usually use that euphemism to explain that. Or you're in favor of small government. And if you are from a higher socioeconomic status, or if you have higher education and you live in that bubble, you're less likely to understand the perspectives of those who didn't have the same opportunities as you or the same income as you.
Yeah, I mean, totally. Like, there's definitely a liberal version of this bubble.
Of course.
Like we don't understand because we don't live like in the deep south or something. We don't understand the danger from immigrant children coming across with polio and tuberculosis and stuff like that. We're not terrified of that because we live in this bubble where that seems crazy. There's lots of things that we don't understand. And I think this is a good explanation for why some educated people follow the Tea Party. There are certainly others. I think that one of the problems, and I've read multiple explanations for why wealthy people follow the Tea Party, the differences between the Tea Party and like the religious right and things like that, the moral majority. Like, what are the actual differences between these groups? And the problem really is that academics need to define things. And so they define the Tea Party as one thing, but the Tea Party isn't one thing. And people join for different reasons. Certain Tea Party offshoots might be more focused on economic issues versus social issues and things like that. And that makes the academic study of the movement incredibly hard.
Yeah, and by the way, I love that you mentioned that because remember, when the Tea Party first started out, it was because they were angry at the financial sector. They were angry at the fact that, you know, people were having their tax money wasted on pointless wars. They were angry about the bailout, like understandable reasons for banding together and being against the government. And then they were kind of co-opted by the Koch brothers, by the religious right, and all of a sudden they're more socially conservative, and people start joining because, you know, they identify as social conservatives that are against gay marriage and abortion and stuff like that. But in this study, he's specifically looking at the issue of small government and government spending. Now, his name is Rory McVeigh. He's the person who did the study. And here's what he said. My thinking was that people who are likely to embrace Tea Party ideology are more likely to be people who have had some success and in life and limited exposure to those who haven't enjoyed the same advantages. Education is such an important predictor of how you end up in life. Now, here's what I also love. The report also notes that educated white middle-class Republicans are more likely to support the Tea Party regardless of educational segregation and in their country or county, although educational segregation exacerbates this likelihood.
Yeah, and look, so I talked earlier about sort of the liberal version of these bubbles. The difference between people who are relatively well off or who have more education, and those are correlated pretty strongly, is not whether or not they're exposed to economic hardship necessarily or people of different racial groups, but it's that you have the inherent compassion and empathy to imagine what it would be like to be in that position. The problem fundamentally with many Tea Party politicians is not just that they don't know poor people or that they haven't spent time in minority communities. It's that they think that that knowledge is irrelevant. And why even go for it? Why try to understand it? It doesn't matter. I already know better. And they're wrong. You need that empathy to understand what's going on in those communities to craft policies that are actually going to benefit them.
Yeah, you need that empathy, but also just to kind of add on to that, I think that a lot of people who start off, middle class or working class and manage to make themselves very, very successful fail to understand that they had certain opportunities given to them that poor people did not have given to them. So for instance, there's this whole issue of institutional racism. And it's really hard to understand institutional racism unless A, you're open to understanding it, or B, you're a victim of it yourself. So if you are a white individual, we talk about white privilege time to time, white privilege includes the notion that you don't have to worry about being stopped and frisked when you're in New York, right? It includes the fact that you don't have these certain obstacles that minorities have to go through, right? The fact that if you have a black hand and you're trying to sell an iPad or an iPod or something like that through eBay, you're less likely to sell it compared to someone who has a white hand.
Or you'll make less money.
Or you'll make less money. So these are all little things that are really, really hard to understand unless you have the empathy, the willingness to learn about these things, or if you've experienced it yourself. We all live in our bubbles. We live in our own bubble here, right? And so just because you were able to become successful doesn't mean that everyone had equal footing. People have different experiences in life.
Yeah, and by the way, I empathize with what these University of Notre Dame researchers are trying to do. In the end, when I was in grad school, I was studying ideology. If I was there, I'd probably be doing studies like this. It is incredibly difficult because ideally, Americans would have relatively high ideological consistency between positions. Like if they support gay marriage versus not supporting it, you should be able to know quite a bit about the other policies that they support or not. But most people don't have the time to study politics, the time to really care about many issues, so they don't have a high level of political sophistication. They have low consistency between positions, and so you want to be able to map out that this is a Tea Party person right here, but in the end you have people who have seemingly, in some cases, random assortments of values and positions. It makes it very hard to map out what an average person is like, and so we need work like this, but in the end it's hard to explain why a movement like the Tea Party has the sort of support that it does.
Yeah. All right, moving on to something much lighter. Actor Eric Stonestreet was talking about his experience at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. And for those of you who are unfamiliar of him, he is one of the stars of Modern Family, a really, really great show that you should check out. There he is. He's awesome.
He's great.
And in the show, he's in a gay relationship. He's raising a daughter with his partner. And of course, they're a funny, great couple. And a lot of people love the show because of them. Now, he was talking about how he likes to go to the White House Correspondents' Dinner because he kind of gets to know politicians for who they really are. And he was also really surprised when he found out that the Obamas are fans of Modern Family. So he said the following about that. President Obama mentioned in an interview like 3 weeks ago, just casually, that Michelle and the kids watch Mitch and Cam and they're in tears. To hear the leader of the free world, the President of the United States, say that, and to know we have that sort of reach with people and that the people in power and leadership are watching the show is incredible. So
Yeah.
he starts off by praising the Obama administration a little bit, but then he talks about politicians that he does not like. And during an interview with Huffington Post, he said the following: Rick Santorum wanted a picture with me. It was at a time when he was publicly saying gay marriage is wrong, and I'm like, you know, I can't do it. It was with him and his kids or something like that, and I said, I'd be happy to take a picture with the kids, but I can't just be in a picture with Santorum.
Yeah. That's a classy move adding on the part about that he'd still do it with the kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
So is he an asshole, do you think?
No, I actually
You
praise.
understand? Yeah.
Yeah, I got it.
No, I mean, you understand where he's coming from and all that. I assume you would
course.
probably do the exact same thing in that situation.
I would.
If he was
but
like, I love the point, I'm a huge fan, can you take a picture with me?
yeah, I would not want to take a picture with Santorum,
Yeah.
but I feel like a lot of celebrities and a lot of other public figures, if put in that situation, would feel pressure to do it, and they would probably just go for it as opposed to stir the pot. And,
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, it's partly that maybe Rick Santorum likes the show. Like, yeah, he's against gay marriage. It doesn't mean that he doesn't watch popular TV shows. And so he wants the picture, and you kind of don't want to do a favor for him because you rightly see that he's an asshole. And I get that, but it's more important than that. He plays a gay character on TV. He probably cares deeply about the struggle that gay Americans are going through right now. Rick Santorum is trying to stop them from making social advances. And for Rick Santorum, being able to show and maybe even fundraise off of a photo with this prominent gay character on TV would allow him to say, yes, I'm against your rights, but I'm not an asshole. Look, I can stand next to them and hug them. Like, you can't allow him that sort of thing because he didn't earn it.
That's a great point. I didn't think about that. Using that celebrity to seem like you're actually like lighthearted and fun and like a cool guy who's...
It's unfair credibility.
And isn't it kind of amazing that you can be so adamantly against gay marriage, and then once you see a celebrity who represents same-sex couples, you're starstruck by that person. You want to take pictures with him, not only by yourself, but with your children as well.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this story.
Yeah, I mean, like, just really fast for our own sake. Like, if we heard, for instance, that Obama had watched some Young Turks videos or something like that, I'd be pretty amazed, I guess, at least in the moment or whatever. And look, realistically, we've got 1.5 billion views on the main channel. He's probably seen a few of them at one point or another. But the important thing is that you can't allow that sort of access in some sense, even an entertainment sense, to influence what you do. If Cenk found out that Barack Obama was watching the Young Turks, he wouldn't be nicer to Obama. He would attack Obama harder because he knows he has a direct line to the president.
Right.
And I think that's what you have to do if you want to be, I guess, consistent with the positions that at least our network is founded on.
And not only that, if you want to be principled, just straight principled. Yeah.
But it would be cool. And the thing is, like I was kind of weirded out at first to think that Rick Santorum would even care about being on the show with a character from Modern Family or whatever. But we know that, for instance, Obama he got the episodes for season 4 of Game of Thrones early, like before it was actually released. Like they watch TV, they watch Breaking Bad and stuff like that. It's got to be kind of cool as an actor to know that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Doesn't mean you have to take a picture with him though.
Let's do one more story before we go to break.
Sure. Okay. Oh, this will be a fun one. If you've been waiting to cash in your V card, that long wait might have been worth it because apparently there's never been a better time to lose your virginity, at least in a few ways. Now, they've been studying sort of the effect emotionally and in terms of satisfaction of losing your virginity for a number of decades, and now we have decades to compare, and things are actually getting better. So to summarize some of the older research back in the day, they would say that although men did tend to feel anxious prior to losing their virginity, previous research found that they also tended to leave the experience feeling okay about it, satisfied, for instance. Women, on the contrary, experience more sadness, guilt, nervousness, embarrassment, and less pleasure, satisfaction, and excitement relative to men. So all of that is, that's bad. That's bad partially for the men that they're feeling overly anxious, but it's especially bad for the women. And the thing is that your first sexual experience can have a long-lasting and durable effect on how you view sex, and so we would want it ideally to be positive in every way. And so now we've got some updated numbers. We're going to bring up some charts here. Let's bring up the first one. And so really fast, if these are not as visually appealing as our previous charts, it's because we're using primary sources, which you guys say you want us to do more. So here, you're getting what you asked for. These are from the actual study. So you're seeing there about 3 decades, from 1980 up until just 2 years ago. The blue line is men, the red line is women charting their average pleasure that they report after losing their virginity. And you're seeing that it's relatively constant for men, just very slightly, probably not statistically significant, higher in the most recent decade. But women have been consistently going up. And certainly that's a good thing. I mean, pleasure is, after all, one of the main goals in a sexual encounter.
I love that. I mean, I like that there's a little less slut shaming these days, and I think that's the reason why women are starting to enjoy it more. And also, people are becoming a little more progressive in terms of their sexual thoughts or ideas. So I think overall it's a great thing. It has a lot to do with how society portrays women who are sexually active or open. And the openness and the willingness to accept women who want to express themselves sexually is a great thing. And obviously it's translating to girls having a better time when they decide that they do want to lose their virginity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that first chart, you see pleasure there. I mean, there's a lot of, like, I love what you said about how society views people having sex. That's definitely a part of it, sort of the psychological, emotional side of losing sex. It could be that we have more advanced condom technology, and so it literally feels better. It could be that thanks to porn, they know more exciting and experimental sexual positions, perhaps. I don't know. It's a complicated thing. They'll look into it. But let's move on from pleasure to anxiety, because as we said early on, men often feel a lot of anxiety before their first sexual encounter. Here's the chart showing the last 3 decades. Male anxiety has actually been going down at least a little bit, about 10% over that time. Female anxiety going up very slightly, perhaps not statistically significant. So, but more importantly, perhaps, in getting to Anna's point about sexual guilt, let's bring up that one. You have, thankfully for both, but especially women, sexual guilt after losing your virginity going down. And as you said, that's almost certainly because society isn't as harsh in terms of how they view women who have sex, who enjoy sex.
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, we would have an environment where comprehensive sex ed is available to everyone. That way, people are educated about sex before they decide to lose their virginity. That way, people are ready to lose their virginity when they actually do it. And I love that guys are feeling less anxiety about it. I mean, to be completely honest with you, putting myself in a man's position, I would be a mess when it comes to losing my virginity, because I think there's a lot more pressure on the man to perform, you know, when they lose their virginity than for the woman to perform.
In some cases.
In some cases, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of anxiety for women as well, but I don't think nearly as much compared to men. So it's good news that the anxiety has gone down for men and the guilt has gone down. And the guilt has gone down for men as well, although they weren't that guilty to begin with.
Exactly.
Right?
This is all my fault.
By the way, I just want to talk about family dynamics as well, because I think that it's actually pretty common for a family where there are 2 siblings, one's a boy, one's a girl. The boy is kind of congratulated when he loses the virginity, right? But it's not the case with the girl. Usually it's a little...
We're going to test this in about 15 years with Cenk Uygur.
Well, Jake
He's got a son and a daughter.
Jake has already spoken about this a little bit,
really?
and I get the sense that he would feel that way. Like, you know, hearing about his daughter having sex would probably make him uncomfortable. Hearing about his son having sex, that's a totally different story. It's like,
Yeah, they're going to do shots together or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love what you talked about the anxiety. And the thing is, like, we saw the number going down, and we've said some of the reasons why socially it would be likely to go down, but there are also reasons why we could have imagined it going up. I mean, people see, thanks to high-speed streaming online porn, and the amount of porn and all that, the availability of it, like, there's a lot of reasons why young girls might feel a tremendous amount of anxiety and pressure because guys have been exposed to insane, unthinkable things before they ever have sex. And that can put sort of a high bar for women to feel that they have to perform to keep up with that. The fact that their anxiety is still going down despite that means that the social effect might even be stronger than we would have otherwise thought. And so that's certainly good. I mean, look, we're libs. We're not scared of sex in the way that religiously oppressed people tend to be in this country. I personally think that it is an incredibly natural thing. There's no reason why younger kids with each other, not with adults, should be doing it. We should make sure that they're safe, that they're educated. Because the thing is, like, is there anything that can lead to more long-term emotional problems in life than having a bad first time and not feeling comfortable sexually throughout your life, not being able to connect in that way with another person? That would be incredibly damaging to a person's psyche, I would imagine. And so we have to do what we can to stop that.
Agreed.
Okay, agreed.
Let's take a break. When we come back, John has a really fascinating study on jealousy in dogs. Stick around.
TYT means the Young Turks, and it's a great show a lively show, and an enlightening show.
Well, I appreciate the Young Turks. You guys are doing a great job. Keep up the great work. Keep them honest up there.
That's like I said, that's why we love having you on all the TYT shows.
Me too. I love all the TYT shows.
You don't indulge in the groupie culture?
No, I don't indulge in the groupie culture.
The groupie culture here must be kind of crazy, right?
And really, I'm so geeked out to be here. I'm like such a child of the internet. I've spent so many years in fucking hotel rooms watching you guys with room service, so it's awesome to be here.
Get ready, mainstream media. You're next in line. We're gonna put you down next, mainstream media.
Of course!
Thank you.